Hey, what's going on, everybody? It's me. I'm finally back to doing my video content. It has been way too long since I produced a video since last season. NFL season is right around the corner. This is usually when I fire my videos back up. So I'm gonna start with what I always have done over the last several years. Is my first video is talking about my favorite topic on fantasy football, which is year three wide receivers. Most of you probably know by now because a lot of people do speak about this strategy where you see the uptick in production for players in their third season. That's usually when, especially when they're in the same offense for three straight seasons, they have a good grasp of the offense. The speed of the game slows down for them, and they also get the nuances of their route running, picking up on what cornerbacks are doing and how they can get open and create that separation, and which usually increases in the amount of targets for them, receptions, yards, and ideally they get to those double-digit touchdowns. Before I dive into this list, what you guys will get from me is you're going to get my top 5 year 3 wide receivers that I'm definitely looking to draft this year. I will speak about, I think it's 5 or 6 players I have in a tier where they're players I'm willing to draft and use a draft selection. And then there's a tier of players where I'm just going to monitor their situation through the preseason, maybe even into the season. Maybe they're not draftable, but their names I'm going to keep an eye on in case an opportunity arises for them to have a big year 3. That being said, I do like to provide some examples from the previous 3 seasons. A couple of these guys were first round picks, so maybe they're not a big surprise, but you get an idea though when you see these stats of how even first round picks, even if they're productive, they can still see an increase in stats in year 3. In 2022, you see CeeDee Lamb. Look at his targets from year 1, 111 to year 2, 120, and then he jumped up all the way to 156 in year 3. That led to him having over 100 receptions in year 3, going over 1,300 yards, and just missing double-digit touchdowns, but he had the most touchdowns of his career at that point. Then you look at Nico Collins, which is an example of a guy, he went, I want to say, I think he was a second or third round pick. Maybe he was a day 3 pick. I do not remember off the top of my head. But he dealt with injuries in his first couple of seasons, so he didn't have that, he flashed, especially in year 2. That's when I remember he caught my eye. So basically in the first couple of years, around 60 targets, 30 receptions, around 450 to 500 yards, and only 3 touchdowns between those 2 years. Now in year 3, he only played 15 games, but you saw him jump. Look at that big increase in targets. He jumped up to 109 targets, jumped up to 80 receptions, over 1,200 yards. Actually, basically 1,300 yards. He would have had over 1,300 yards if he would have played those extra 2 games. Then he got to 8 touchdowns, which you imagine if he could caught a touchdown in the last 2 games that he missed, he could have got to double-digit touchdowns. And then you look at another former first-round pick who just saw, he had a high floor in his first 2 years, right? Drake London, he had over 110 targets in each of his first 2 years, over 69 receptions in his first 2 years, right around that 860 to 900 yards between the first 2 years, and 4 touchdowns in his first year, 2 touchdowns in year 2. And then look at what happened in year 3. Jumps up to 158 targets. He gets to 100 receptions, and he gets over 1,250 yards, and just almost to that double-digit touchdowns with 9 touchdowns. So again, that's a good example. There's other examples out there too. There's a guy I'm going to talk about later that kind of reminds me of my classic remembrance of a random year 3 explosion is Nelson Aguilar, who didn't do nothing in his first 2 years, had a huge year 3. Now, did that lead to future career success? No, but he still was a very valuable fantasy wide receiver in his third season. With that being said, I'm going to go ahead and dive into this list and go over this for you guys. My number 1 wide receiver, it's pretty easy just because he has such a high floor. My number 1 year 3 wide receiver is going to be Puka Nacua. You look at what he did in year 1 when he was healthy for all 17 games. He had 160 targets, 105 receptions for 1,486 yards, and he had 6 touchdowns. Now, last year he did deal with injuries, so he only played 11 games. But in those 11 games, he still had over 100 targets, reached 79 receptions, almost got to 1,000 yards, and he only had 3 touchdowns. Way I view Puka this year, he's a high floor player where he should at least at the minimum get you that year one production. I would like to see him close the receptions and targets. Now, you might be worried about Davante Adams being there, but I think that is a positive for Puka. Davante Adams is still a good, very good wide receiver in the league, so that's going to create one-on-one opportunities for Puka to produce. I mean, he was still, now obviously Kupp had a fall off, but Puka is still a couple years ago when Kupp didn't have his major fall off that we saw last year, was still able to put up numbers, and he does have a decent backup situation. Matthew Stafford, you know, he's still older in age. He has dealt with injuries, so you do have to factor in his quarterback situation. Jimmy G is the backup. While I wouldn't see that as a similar situation if he has to play, but he should be able to at least get him the ball, and I wouldn't be too concerned if Matthew Stafford had to miss any time this year. My number 2 wide receiver, which I think we could see, like, you know how like CeeDee Lamb jumped up really big, you know how Drake London jumped up really big. I can really see that happening for Zay Flowers in Baltimore. You look at his first 2 seasons, a very good baseline floor for, when you compare what to CD and what Drake did. Right, he had over 108 targets in each of the first 2 years. He had over 74 receptions in those first 2 years. He had 858 yards his first year, had his first 1,000-yard receiving game last year, and he had those 4 touchdowns. So I'm looking for him to actually make a major jump, getting closer to 150 targets, getting closer to 100 receptions, getting to probably around 1,200 yards, and I would love to see him to get to double-digit touchdowns. Now, I do understand though with Baltimore that Rashad Bateman, DeAndre Hopkins, Isaiah Likely, and Mark Andrews could hamper Zay Flowers' ability to reach double-digit touchdowns, because those guys are those bigger body targets when Baltimore does get closer to the end zone. But I could still just see him putting up those receptions and yards, especially for you in those PPR leagues. My number 3 wide receiver that I like, my number 3 wide receiver that's a little tongue-tied, entering year 3 is Jackson Smith-Njigba. First year, he had 93 targets, 63 receptions, 628 yards, and 4 touchdowns. Now, last year, he had a very good season with 137 targets, 100 receptions, 1,130 yards, and 6 touchdowns in those 16 games. Now, they traded away DK Metcalf. Tyler Lockett has left Seattle. He's now in Tennessee. So he is the number 1 target. Now, Cooper Kupp has signed with Seattle this offseason, but I still think Jackson Smith-Njigba should be dominating the targets. My biggest concern, why I have him below Zay Flowers, is I'm not the biggest Sam Darnold believer. Yes, he did have a great year last year in Minnesota, but I don't see he's going to replicate that success in Seattle. But with that being said, he is a quality enough quarterback to give you a good floor with Smith-Njigba if you want to spend a pick on him. Now, Darnold, he's one of those quarterbacks I do have to look into their backup situation. The backup is Drew Lock or Jalen Milroe, depending on who wins that job in training camp. Not very excited if Drew Lock's the guy. I kind of could see I wouldn't be excited about Milroe either, because I think if Milroe would end up coming in for any reason, whether if Darnold doesn't play that great or if Darnold does get hurt, you're going to see them probably switch to more of a run-heavy offense, which would hurt Smith-Njigba. But way I view him is I think he just has a good floor for people that want to use a draft selection on him, just because he's going to be fed so many targets this season. My number 4 year 3 wide receiver I'm going to talk about is Jordan Addison for the Vikings. He's another guy just like Zay Flowers, right? Like I mentioned about CeeDee Lamb and Drake London, a first round pick that's been very steady as far as production, right? In his first 2 seasons, he had at least over 99 targets, over 63 receptions, over 875 yards. And what I do like is he had 19 touchdowns in his first 2 years, and that's playing with Justin Jefferson on the opposite side. Now, the biggest question mark and why I don't have Jordan too high on this list is we don't know what J.J. McCarthy's going to bring. If McCarthy does get hurt, it's Sam Howell as the backup. So that's why he's not as high. if I trusted the quarterback situation, I'm such a believer in Jordan Addison's talent. I probably would have ranked him second on this list, but there's such a question mark about the quarterback position. That's why I have him drop down to 4. But I still see him. Now I do have to mention he has a DUI case, which he pled not guilty actually today. If he does get any type of charge, from what I understand, from what was tweeted from Adam Schefter today, he could face a 3-game suspension. So maybe that would hamper him getting to what I think he could get. But if he doesn't get suspended, I think he should get to a close to 100 receptions this year, get over 1,000 yards, and I could see him getting around 10 touchdowns, possibly less, just because he's been so productive getting into the end zone in his first 2 seasons. My number 5 year 3 wide receiver I like, especially for PPR leagues, because I think he can be a PPR machine, is going to be Josh Downs for the Colts. He's gotten fed a lot of targets in his first 2 years. He's gotten at least 98 targets, at least 68 receptions, has gotten at least 770 yards, and he had 2 touchdowns in year 1, 5 touchdowns last year, and he only played in 14 games. Now, he has the talent, and he has shown he has a talent. He's shown the progress in his stat production where he could see that major jump in year 3. Now, kind of like I mentioned with Jordan Addison, where we don't know about JJ McCarthy, there's obviously a major question about the Colts quarterback situation. Is it going to be Anthony Richardson? Is it going to be Daniel Jones? We don't know, but I think one positive you can take for Josh Downs heading into the year is look at that production he put up in year 2. That was with Anthony Richardson and Joe Flacco, who Flacco didn't play that great for the Colts like he did for the Browns a couple years. Now, another concern I would have is just seeing consistent targets. The Colts still have Michael Pittman Jr., they still have Alec Pierce, they still have Adonai Mitchell, but regardless, they still had those guys last year, and he still got fed targets in the offense. Shane Steichen likes him. He's going to work that slot, and I could see him, especially maybe if Jones gets in there, I could see him being fed from Jones quite often. So yeah, those are my top 5 year 3 wide receivers I'm definitely looking to lead my draft with. Now, just kind of going over this next tier of players, these are year 3 wide receivers I'm willing to use a draft selection on. My number 1, this is a guy I was debating, should I put him in number 5 over Josh Downs or not? So he kind of was on a borderline of making my top 5, but Rashee Rice for the Chiefs. I kind of give you a breakdown. First, when he was healthy, his first year, he had a great year. 102 targets, 79 receptions, 938 yards, and 7 touchdowns. Then he only played 4 games and suffered that injury. So the biggest concern for me with Rice, which we should be getting answers here in training camp and in the preseason, is how does he look after his injury? If he looks like he did a couple years ago during his rookie season, then yeah, he's a guy I'm going to be very high on when the drafts really ramp up here in a month. Now, I could see them with him coming off an injury, though, I could see them easing him into the season, not feeding him too much, slowly working him into the offense, getting him back acclimated. So you might have to be patient with Rice to start the year. And then I do wonder how he will compete with targets. They still have Travis Kelce. They got Xavier Worthy. They brought back Hollywood Brown. Juju Smith-Schuster's still there. He's going to work in the slot. But what I could see, though, is if Rice is able to get acclimated by the halfway point of the year, I could see him seeing the most consistent targets, especially because, Kelce's on that back half of his career. But another thing, too, just like Addison, now, from what I understand, Addison's suspension, if that happens, that would probably be like the first 3 games of the year. We don't really know what's going on with Rashee Rice. He might be suspended this year. He might not. So that's something you have to actually keep in the back of your mind, that there's a possibility that Rice could be suspended at some point of this year from that, what was he, racing down in Texas or something? He got arrested for that accident. So that is something you have to keep in mind. Another guy I'm willing to take a selection on is Jayden Reed for the Packers. Over his first 2 years, he's had at least 75 targets. He's gotten at least 55 receptions and at least 799 yards. In his first year, he had 8 touchdowns. In his second year, he had 6 touchdowns. This is a guy where if they didn't draft Matthew Golden in the first round, I would be very high. He's another guy. If they didn't draft Matthew Golden, he would have been competing for that number 5 spot on my list. That's my biggest concern with him, though, is just seeing consistent targets with Matthew Golden. They still have Romeo Doubs. We'll have to see when Christian Watson will be able to play. They still have a Dontavian Wicks, a name I'll talk about later. But if anybody gets traded out of that Packers wide receiving corps, including Reed, what if Reed gets traded to a better situation where he can see those consistent targets? He could see his value rise, which is why I'm willing to spend a draft pick on him here in this next month when the drafts pick up. Another guy that's I think a dark horse to have a big, huge year 3 jump, a guy I really loved when he entered his draft class, is going to be Marvin Mims for the Broncos. He doesn't have like eye-popping production, but he was able to kind of really get things going for the Broncos at that back half of the schedule last year. First year, just 33 targets, 22 receptions, 377 yards, and 1 touchdown. And then last year, he got 52 targets, 39 receptions, 503 yards, and 6 touchdowns. I can actually see him doubling his production this year. I can see him getting around 80 receptions. I put slash touches because they will use him on like little handoffs. He's kind of a little of a gadget guy to him. I could see him getting around 1,000 yards. Maybe he can get close to 10 touchdowns, but I also understand that Cortland Sutton and Evan Ingram might be the players in the Broncos offense that could impact his ceiling as a touchdown receiver, just because, like I mentioned earlier with other guys, those guys are a bit bigger body presence, so they can dominate the red zone targets. And another guy I like is Michael Wilson for the Cardinals. He's a guy I really liked since his rookie season. Year 1, he had 58 targets, 38 receptions, 565 yards, 3 touchdowns. Year 2, he got 71 targets, 47 receptions, 548 yards, and 4 touchdowns. The way I view him and why I'm willing to draft him is I think he can develop into a solid bench option. I think he's a guy where if the matchup is right, you can put him in. When you start dealing with bye weeks, I think he's going to be a quality option that people can put into their lineups. But if he has that year 3 jump, you're talking about a guy that can be a wide receiver 3, maybe 2 throughout the year. Now, my one concern with him is just dealing with consistent targets for him to be a week in and week out starter. Obviously, they have Trey McBride, Marvin Harrison Jr., Greg Dortch, and they did sign Zay Jones this offseason. Another guy I like, I was picking up last year because it seems like this guy had developed a chemistry, which I really like heading into this year with Drake May, is Pop, whatever you want to call him, Pop Douglas, Demario Douglas for the Patriots. First year, even in his first 2 years, he's gotten at least 79 receptions. At least he had 79, at least 79 targets in each 2 years. He got 49 receptions first year, 66 receptions his second year. He got 561 yards in first year, 621 yards last year, and he had no touchdowns this first year and had 3 touchdowns last year. What I do like is I always suggest people like pay attention to what coaches are saying, pay attention to what players are saying about other players on the roster when you get through training camp and everything. And Mike Vrabel, their head coach for the New England, was actually really talking up Pop Douglas after minicamp back in June. Now, the concern with him it's kind of been a consistent theme why these guys are in this tier of players is just seeing consistent targets. They got Stephon Diggs. There's other wide receivers. They have like 5 or 6 wide receivers in this room. So you might have to be patient with him, but I could see after cut down date, him having a clear path to targets. And then I can also see them trading away some of the players. I don't think Pop Douglas is a guy they would trade away. I think they could trade away some of their other backup options, which would clear the path for Mario Douglas. I think with him, he's a guy I'm willing to spend a pick on, see how this develops for him in the first 4 weeks, and then see if he can come a weekly option, or maybe if he's like a Michael Wilson, how I view him, where he's a quality guy to have on your bench. And then guys just to watch their role unfold. I mentioned Nelson Aguilar earlier. We all know Quentin Johnston. He has troubles with his drops out there in LA. He is a former first-round pick. Guess what Nelson Aguilar was? A former first-round pick who struggled with drops in his first 2 years. But for whatever reason, he caught everything in year 3. Had a great year for the Philadelphia Eagles. Now, like I mentioned, didn't have a great career after that, but he was still a fantasy relevant wide receiver in year 3. And I could see that happening for Quentin Johnston. And now The one thing I do get concerned with, though, is Mike Williams and Trey Harris. Now, Mike Williams is on the PUP list. They have to remove him off the PUP list before the season. So that's something to pay attention to. And then Trey Harris is a rookie wide receiver to watch for them. But again, he's a former first round year 3 wide receiver. I'm not saying, again, this is a tier of guys just to monitor their situation in the preseason. Maybe they come late round draft worthy, but maybe these are guys you pick up off the waivers in the season. And that's Quentin Johnson is one of those names I'm keeping an eye on, as well as Trey Tucker for the Raiders. He's a guy I could maybe see myself throwing a dart at in the late rounds when the drafts come around here in a month. Trey Tucker, in his year 1, he had 34 targets, just 19 receptions, 331 yards, 2 touchdowns. And then he doubled up to 81 targets last year, 47 receptions, 539 yards, and 3 touchdowns. And that was with very bad quarterback play. Geno Smith has been a very solid quarterback, so I can see him being more productive this year with Geno Smith as his quarterback. Honestly, the only person that's going to dominate targets in Las Vegas is Brock Bowers. And right now, he's just going to be competing with Jacoby Myers to have the most targets, in my opinion, behind Brock Bowers. So there is a path for him to be that dark horse sleeper. So do pay attention to Trey Tucker in the training camp and preseason and seeing if he's worthy of a dart throw in your drafts. Cedric Tillman for the Browns, that's another name I'm keeping an eye on. He's had at least 44 targets in each year. Just he had under 30 receptions, under 400 yards, just 3 touchdowns, but I always liked his talent. Now, he only played 14 games in year 1 and 11 games in year 2. But I do think he has a path to having the second or third most targets on this team. I could see him have a big jump in his touchdown production this season because he's got that bigger size. But as we all know with Cleveland, who's going to be the quarterback throwing to him? Is it going to be Joe Flacco? And if it's Joe Flacco, is he going to play like he did 2 years ago? Kenny Pickett doesn't excite me. Dylan Gabriel doesn't excite me. Then you got Shedeur Sanders. And obviously we saw the drop that Shedeur Sanders had. But what if Shedeur Sanders was able to hit the ground running? Again, that's why Tillman's in my tier of guys, just to see how he's looking and how the quarterback situation is looking. And that's maybe a name you're going to pick up off the waivers if he does produce in the first month of the year. A guy I mentioned earlier when I talked about Jayden Reed, Dontavian Wicks. He's a guy that people were really high on last year. He's a guy that dealt with drops. He's a guy that in his first season had 58 targets, 39 receptions, 581 yards, and 4 touchdowns. Year 2, he had 76 targets, 39 receptions, 415 yards, and 5 touchdowns. Now, just like I mentioned with Reed, the biggest concern is what is his target load going to look like each week? He's got Matthew Golden, he's got Reed, Dobbs, and Watson. Now, he's a guy where I don't really see the Packers wanting to trade Reed. I mentioned that as a possibility, but Wicks is a guy where you could see a team that needs a wide receiver, maybe like the Steelers with Aaron Rodgers, right? Where they could trade for a Wicks, and then all of a sudden, if Wicks goes into a favorable situation where he can see that consistent targets, all of a sudden he will become very valuable in fantasy. Again, if he sticks on the Packers, he's a guy I'm going to keep an eye on during the season on the waivers. But if he gets traded between now and the start of the season, and he goes to a favorable situation, he might be worth a dart throw in those drafts. Another guy that might be worth a dart throw, depending on if he gets traded, is Kayshon Boutte for the Patriots. He really came on last year. He didn't do nothing year 1. He only played in 5 games. Last year he had 68 targets, 43 receptions, 589 yards, and 3 touchdowns. He's a guy that has really all the talent since he was at LSU. He's just, from what I understood, he has kind of the off-field issues, so hopefully he can put that together by year 3. Again, like I mentioned with Pop Douglas, he's dealing with a crowded wide receiver room, so you just have to you just have to monitor that. But if he's able to carve out a role in the preseason, he's a guy I would watch into the regular season, and then if he starts to see like some value, you pick him off the waivers and stash him on your bench. But like I just mentioned with Wicks, if Boutte gets traded to a favorable situation, he might be a guy be a dart throw on your draft board. Now, my last guy, he's a guy I just like watching this kid play, and I'm probably going to butcher his name, but the Bengals' third wide receiver, Andre, I think it's Iosivas. I want to say that's how you say it. I think I remember the announcers announcing that right. This is just a guy you're not going to draft him. He's just a guy to keep an eye on if Jamar Chase or T. Higgins gets hurt. Year one didn't really do much. He had 25 targets, 15 receptions, 116 yards, but he had 4 touchdowns on those 15 receptions. Now, last year, he was more productive. He had 61 targets, 36 receptions, 479 yards, and 6 touchdowns. Anytime you can get a wide receiver with Joe Burrow, I'm going to keep my eye on it. So, again, you're not going to draft an Andre Iosivas, if I'm saying that right. But if you see T. Higgins or Jamar Chase get hurt, that's the name you're going to want to go pick off the waivers, especially if you're managing one of those two guys this season. All right, so yeah, I hope I was able to shake off the rust there for my first video since at the end of last season. It was very good to be back, guys. As always, if you enjoyed the video, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and make sure you do follow me on all my social media platforms. You guys, my plan is to try to pump out as much fantasy videos as I can over this next month until the drafts pick up. I think I'm gonna do some late round sleepers for quarterback, running back, wide receiver, and tight end over the next week or so. I'm gonna try to get my next video at least to you guys out by Saturday, if not before then. And then I'll be doing some tier videos like I did last year. And I'm gonna try to get it all done by mid-August, because that's when the drafts will be really ramping up. I know people have drafts now and early August, but in my opinion, if you have that schedule with your commissioner, go talk to him and get him schedule it in the back half of August, because nothing's worse than when you draft a player and he gets hurt. I'm gonna hop off here. Thank you guys for tuning in, especially if you guys stayed subscribed to me in my little downtime over the past 6 months. But I'm gonna be ramping things up for you guys. So I'll talk to you soon. Peace out.